Welcome to the Augmentation of Man with Kent and Renee Miller, where we are giving the future.
We're going to discuss allowing the higher self into your sphere.
These are a couple of lessons. Well, it's a compilation of lessons taken from the two books in the Augmentation of Man series, The Acquiescence of Humanity, and that is out of chapter 4, and also A Study in Renaissance, and that's out of chapter 12. And we're going to talk about some new information that I think most people in the spiritual community have not heard about, and it relates to nanoparticles within our DNA that are going to be possibly turned on for at least part of the population. So we're going to get into that.
Defining crystalline.
Yeah, that's another thing is there is information that's been floating around out there within the spiritual community about our bodies becoming more crystalline based. And we're going to get into what our guidance is saying about that thought and whether or not it's correct. And then we're going to be, this whole thing is focused on how to allow the higher self to start coming forward.
Yeah, and what happens when you do?
Yeah, what can we expect with that?
Yeah.
And so we need to start with, what is the higher self? And I think you probably have a better idea of it because your higher self is in control at this point and comes through and gives lessons to us.
Okay, well, the higher self is a difficult task. Not that I am different, but it's a difficult task to get into. So who you are in reality, the higher self speaks strictly on truth. There is no ego involved. There is no better than the other thing next to you or around you. It strictly has to do with pure truth.
And so, your ability to access information,
yeah, and
right?
Accessing it is not easy. Well, we thought maybe 22.5% could access it, but I'm not sure if that's absolute because it says it's very, very few.
Yeah, so we've gotten information that there 22.5% maybe have the ability to access it, but in reality, very few are actually doing it.
It will give the individual the right direction they're supposed to go. And many people think, well, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that. But it tries to direct the organic entity in the right direction to perform its best at what it's supposed to do.
Now, when you talk about the organic entity,
also plants,
you're talking about the physical self.
Yeah, but there's also plants and trees and things like that that are kind of directed. As you know, the mushroom organization kind of speaks to itself underground and forms a communical
with this mycelium network underground, and it's able to communicate in a community.
Yeah, we're just able to communicate in a different way. So
through a network that's in the atmosphere called the neuronet.
That's right.
And that is accessing consciousness.
So we have to try to nurture the higher self. You're never too young or too old to begin trying to nurture your higher self and bring it forward.
And the higher self is our conscious self. This is part of the soul. It's much bigger. It's a larger energy, right?
Yeah, we don't listen. It's the what we call background noise almost. It's the background thinking or vocal and not only thought, but it encompasses much more than thought and vision. But it's the background, and we don't listen to our background noise. Basically, you could say we listen to our self up front.
I think we've kind of been
Yeah.
trained to turn that off
Yeah.
because of, issues with schizophrenia and that
Right,
sort of thing.
right.
It's
So-
been demonized, but then what we're focused on is our thoughts.
Our ego.
And then the
self.
thoughts, we get that monkey mind going.
Right. Our ego self is in control. So the resistance to how we're supposed to react is embroiled in our self through a very young age. We're guided by peers and our parents and everything else, that we have to be a certain way and act a certain way, which is against the higher self.
And so the higher self is guiding us, but it's also teaching us. And this is, we have this trove of consciousness and understanding held within the soul. And the higher self is kind of feeding that back to us, that understanding back to us. Is that correct?
Prayer is very similar to meditation. And basically, it is meditation. And people ask in prayer all these different things, but they never listen for very few listen for an answer. Very few.
And so they're talking about this higher self being the ancient self. This is through all of our reincarnations. This is the main self, the soul that has set off on its own conscious driven learning path. And each lifetime focuses on various aspects of learning of all kinds of things. And it's not necessarily what we would think of, in this lifetime. We might think that we're really great people and we've really tried to be moral and make good judgments. But in past lifetimes, we could have done some things that we would find very offensive to our way of thinking today. But it's all about balance in our understanding.
So we know the higher self holds truth. And the higher self is our connection with the Creator.
And so we are going to get a little bit more into that and how to try and connect with the higher self. So the percent we've already discussed, the percent of people who have the ability is 22.5%, but in reality, very few are connecting with the higher self and listening to the higher self for guidance and for the teaching. But also the higher self is able to connect with other outside entities, where the outside entity will bring forward new information, and then the higher self can communicate that to our
understanding.
Yeah. Well, at the physical level, but it comes through like a telepathic thought.
Right.
Okay.
And
so
if you understand the number that when you gave that 22.5% relates to the people, more to the people that are moving into the next cycle.
Yes.
And the next cycle is the natives, Native Hopi or different tribes say it's the fourth, going into the fifth world. We're in the fourth world now, or the fourth dimension. Some say going into the fifth dimension.
And but our guides are saying we're not getting into the fifth dimension yet.
No.
We have to understand what the fifth dimension is about before we get into it.
So that's why we always say it's like the Hopi leaving the fourth world and going into the new dimension, the new fifth world, or the new fifth cycle.
And it's a cycle that's tied to specific learning that we need to accomplish within that cycle. Just like if you were to go to first grade, the object of first grade is to learn how to read. And so each cycle has an object of learning, and that it has to be accomplished within that cycle. So what should the human race be doing at this time to catch up with our learning? Because, you know, we were told that we were on this alternate learning path, and it took us through our ego, it took us off the true learning path. Now, so what do we need to do?
We're coming back into learning, the true learning path, but at the learning path we're on, we should watch for repercussions of the destruction that's going on. The destruction of the learning path we're on now is beginning as we come into our true learning path.
And I would imagine that that destruction is associated with all that is not aligned to the true learning path.
That's right.
So the corruption, the banking system, our educational system,
all these things,
our farming, all of these things are going to be destroyed to make the corrections to get us back on the right way.
Humankind has been in corruption for so long, for thousands of years, and has been turning away slowly from the Creator in the Creator's direction. So they've been following man's rule now for many hundreds of years. Man's rule has caused the movement of the human race to a certain direction, which is causing destruction. So,
and I would say that, you know, people tend to put intellect, higher education, science above God and above the Creator. And we would have to say that we cannot forget about our connection to the Creator, because everything that we learn comes from the Creator. And
even though we don't think so, it does.
It does. And so intellect does not matter when there's no understanding or wisdom that comes with it. And that is created by this universal consciousness. And you have to have a spiritual wanting for that and a connection to the Creator to be able to attain that. So we have to have, we don't have to be religious, but we do have to have a connection with the Creator.
There are monasteries in the world where those believe in a higher learning and in love with all that is. That's everything that's organic, from the smallest tiny creature to the big creatures of trees and things. They understand in these particular areas what life is, what the truth is, the higher self is.
But also all that is all those intellectual entities out there, whether they're physical or non-physical, and the total, the sum total of all consciousness or all conscious energy at any given moment. And that fluctuates depending on how quickly the consciousness is taking hold and spreading.
Yeah,
So I had asked you a question after one of these meditations where your higher self came through and gave the lesson. And the question was, can you paint a picture of your higher self's connection to all that is?
I remember saying it was just a smart spark. It's a reflection of the self. In seeking of eternal being, it was like a small speck of light.
And a small speck of light in comparison to all the light that
Yes.
exists. And the
Yeah.
light is all the consciousness that exists. So when we talk about the light and the light that's spoken of in ancient texts, it's talking not about this visible light, it's talking about the conscious energy that holds the understanding and the wisdom.
You have to learn how to contain and how to understand and secure the internal being that's within, and understanding what it's about, where it comes from, and understanding the task of your own human being,
Why we're here.
And
it's all about the learning. And so, but this is not something that can be accomplished
in 1 week or 1 month,
or even a year.
Yeah, it takes a lifetime.
And in many lifetimes. So we're building upon each lifetime. We're learning, just like when we go to school, we go to kindergarten, we're learning our alphabet and how to count and our colors and things like that. Or at least that's the way it was when we were growing up. The kindergartners now are learning more than that. But then as you progress to first grade, then you're learning how to read. So you're building upon what you learned previous to first grade. And the same thing works with each lifetime and each cycle. We're building upon the previous and we're adding to that wealth of knowledge that we're accumulating at the soul level.
So when you are able to contact yourself, it feels like that you understand what your higher self is telling you. And all ego is gone. All ego is put aside. There is no egotistical behavior in the understanding. And as you begin to love everything, I mean everything.
And understand your
And
connection to everything, right?
Right. And the word love, like we use it here on earth, is lacking many aspects, is very superficial. So,
and very conditional,
yeah,
isn't it?
It's very conditional. So the one true love of your life is your higher self, because it holds truth.
Yeah.
So,
and your true love of your life, when you have the right partner in your life,
oh yeah,
you learn together. You're
Yeah,
on this
yeah.
path together, and you're searching together. It's a and you can accomplish so much more
Yes, you can.
than these couples who one is on the path and one isn't, because the one who isn't holds the other back. We see this time and
Yeah.
again. So in October 2018, I asked a question of our guides: is the time right in the next solar cycle to reconnect with a higher self? Now, there's a reason why I was saying in the next solar cycle, because we had been getting some information about how the atmospheric gases were going to change, our DNA was going to change relative to the change in the atmospheric gases. But what changes the atmospheric gases? And that is coming from outside the Earth. And so they informed us it's already happening. So by 2018, it had already begun, and that there was a purification coming. And I think that they were talking more of a purification, of our thinking process, because in the destruction of all these things that are happening, we think of it as social, societal ways of doing business. So like the banking system and the educational system, but also we are so now aligned to truth that truth doesn't exist anymore. And also everything is, man's tampered with nature. So everything is unnatural now, the way that we're doing things. And all of that has to be destroyed so that we can come to alignment with truth, but also we can come to alignment with an understanding of what we're doing to our environment and how this is creating a grave imbalance within the earth on many levels, and many levels that humanity in general is not even aware of at this point.
Yeah. Well, we talked much about meditation, and we thought, well, is it through meditation is connecting with the higher self? And it has to do with the cleansing of self. So remuneration of the soul and the higher self kind of goes together, but cleansing of the self.
That's the cleansing of the thoughts.
That's right, cleansing of your
And,
thoughts.
and so this purification and the cleansing is a cleansing of how we think and how we perceive reality to a more accurate depiction of our world and of truth.
Yeah, acquiescing to the one, and the one being the self. So, but you have to understand what encompasses the one before you can go there.
And so to me, that speaks of we can say we're all one, but we really don't understand it until we can access the higher self and understand how we have access to universal consciousness and how clearly it can come through and how we can grow in our understanding. But that's through this network, this neural net and this conscious network where other entities can also bring in understanding and wisdom.
Yeah, we always say we're all going to act as one. We're all going to be one, except you and you and you. There's always an exception.
Yeah.
So we're never one, because somebody always points out there's an exception to the one.
So
with those
we won't truly understand what the one is until we can learn to access our higher self, and then we'll truly understand it.
So we were talking about those are awakening, and will they have a reconnection or a connection with the higher self if they begin to try to attain the higher self in the direction of what they're supposed to go? Then that is the beginning. But you have to let the higher self direct you. You cannot let your ego step in. You have to let the higher self take over some aspect to direct what you're supposed to do.
And so when they speak of awaken, it is it's breaking down that individuality of I am who I am, and I'm associating myself with this lifetime and my lifestyle and the car I drive and the way that I want to project myself through the clothes that I wear and the jewelry that I wear, that sort of thing. But when you awaken, that's when you are having this reconnection with the higher self, and that you're able to start seeing that connection of the oneness of all that is.
So we're talking about those that really want to learn. You can almost say it creates a voracious appetite to learning, which is going to be huge for those that really want to learn. We've seen that. Some people really want to learn. They have a heck of an appetite.
But even as these times are progressing and more people are waking up, then those people will start to take on the true purpose of why we're here in this voracious appetite for learning.
It'll happen very, very soon, we're told by our guides. So
and this discussion will start to open back up again. So, we need to really push back against the censorship and the stifling of discourse and intellectual discussion, and allow that to open so that the higher self can be displayed here in our world.
So what's causing this change?
So it is an atmospheric change that is going to be happening.
We're going to talk a little bit about atmospheric changes now. Give you a kind of a background of what is pushing all this movement forward.
I want to start with back in, I believe it was 2010, the astronomers and scientists noticed that there was these cosmic rays coming in from our galactic center. And so as we were told, and that is in this book, A Study in Renaissance, that there was a neutron explosion and it was headed for Earth. But as all these particles blast off from this imploding star,
or
that
somewhere in space,
or this neutron explosion, it they collide, these particles collide, and then they cause all the particles to break up into the subatomic structure of those particles. So then you end up with X-rays and gamma rays and things of this nature. Now, our Earth has this ionosphere around it, and all of these, and the electromagnetic field collect all these particles and store it in there and keep it from raining down on Earth. But then when we have like the solar wind, CME, cold corona mass ejection, that disrupts the electromagnetic field and allows all these particles to rain down on the Earth, and that affects us and our DNA.
So when does this plasmic field that we know exists comes into this planetary system and the gamma rays, then they turn on what we call the free docs.
Okay, so we need to explain what a free doc is. And the free docs are nanoparticles within the DNA on this sphere that flow within the ionic pattern of all living matter. So ions are charged particles, and it is connected to those, the charged particles that surround us. And it's influenced by what's going on in our atmosphere, the energies that are going on within our atmosphere.
Yeah, so the free docs really opens our higher self, or helps open the higher self.
It can allow the higher self expression. And then what they're telling us is that the creative beings, so the creative beings act on behalf of the creator. They're the teachers, these usually spiritual teachers, they're non-physical, can help in this process and start to open up this telepathic communication for those who have that expression that's opened up.
And we're told that there's very few people that have the DNA that allows this to happen. Unfortunately, that will add. Right now, there's just a few people, but I think it will add more people
In the future, as we
continue.
progress. Yeah, because we're being told more and more people are awakening now. And so this will allow the explosion of the inner being to come out and be expressed, and allow knowledge, have an acceptance of this knowledge to come forth from outside of themselves, and not be so tied into the human understanding of science, but to be more open-minded to new ways of thinking that are more aligned to a universal understanding.
Yeah. We were told by our guides, Christosis is a pattern of energy.
And yeah, so
it doesn't mean it's conditioned mankind is going to.
It's a pattern of energy that's going to allow this expression. It's a large sphere of energy, and it's a geometric pattern of energy that has like it implies a crystalline energy, and that will allow the free dots to be expressed for people who have this in their DNA. However, it kind of brought upon us that thought of maybe this was what people in the spiritual community, how they started to think that our bodies would become crystalline, when in fact our bodies are being influenced by this pattern of crystalline energy, and that is being expressed by the geometry of that energy. So when we asked our guides about this, if our bodies would become more crystalline, the answer was that it was non-conductive. So if we had a crystalline body, it would be non-conductive, and it cannot survive as a crystalline energy in this physical form.
Therefore, our bodies cannot survive as a crystalline energy, but a crystalline pattern can influence
the free dots to open so that we can have more DNA expression, and we can start to reconnect with the higher self, and from there start to connect with a creative being that is going to bring in new understanding through a telepathic communication.
Well, what we're supposed to be doing here is understanding the higher self, understanding what it's about, and then relying more of our decision making on the higher self, not our own self. And this can only happen this can only happen if you rely and believe what the higher self says to you.
But also that that you have this connection with the creator.
Right.
And so we need to focus on the creator. And the other thing is that other people have become so caught up with the worldly affairs that they've forgotten about God. And so
about the creator.
We need to turn back to the creator.
What the creator encompasses is far beyond what we see in front of us. Far beyond.
Oh yeah.
So,
and it's not a man in the sky.
No,
it's not the personality
it's
that
energy beyond our comprehension.
Yeah, and actually it has more of a scientific sort of understanding when you understand what the creator is, rather than a human depiction of the creator, of a God.
So when the opening in the higher self occurs, what changes as far as when we see or hear? What changes develop? So the status of the self will reflect on a higher learning. Where your self is, reflect on your learning. So, and your understanding to the higher learning aspects of understanding.
And so what can we do to start listening to that inner voice and that higher self?
Yeah, you've got to let the background noise, what I call it, come through. When you make a decision and somebody said, I felt my gut, I should have made that decision, but I used my head and I made this decision and turned out to be not quite what I expected, or it turned out to be wrong. Your gut feeling, I feel, is part of the higher self. And it's trying to direct you into the right direction on decision making.
Well, the gut feeling too is influenced by the energies that are coming through the chakras that are communicating to us. And the gut feeling is kind of that root feeling of that communication. And so it is in tune with the truth, And if we listen to that gut feeling, then we're able to better realize what the truth is, and the decisions that we're making, if it is in alignment to what our true path is.
Yeah, I mean, you hear saying most people, I should have went with my gut feeling.
Mhm.
You know, not everybody, but most people, I should have went with my gut feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
I think everybody's been there.
yeah.
So it's about turning off a lot of the chatter that's going on in our minds as far as our own thought processes. And a lot of it is we get caught up in the drama of our society and our world. We get caught up in the politics, the things that divide us. We get caught up in fear of future events that may or may not happen. We get caught up in the guilt, feelings of guilt based on past events that you can't change.
Or based on events that you want to make up to create a power vacuum within what you see. In other words, ego and guilt creates power.
Oh, yeah. And so we need to let go of all that. So when we go into meditation and we are trying to suppress that monkey mind, suppress all those thoughts that are really irrelevant, and then listen to the background voice that's coming through. So when you first start meditating, you want to try to calm the mind and delete the thoughts and just allow it. Don't get so agitated. This takes a long time, months, years. Some people can do it quick, and some people it takes a lot longer. But to release those thoughts, just gently let them go.
I think it's said that 96% of what we think is going to happen, what we worry about, will probably never happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's no point in worrying about the future, right? And so we want to release the thoughts and the worries and our fears. That's another one. And then listen to the voices that come through.
Yeah. So
that are not, obviously not a part of your thinking process.
Right. So I want to thank you for being with us. I hope you learned a little bit of what we said today. It wasn't too confusing.
Yeah. And I do want to say that our guides, I had asked recently, what message do you want us to put out? And we did put it out with the last video, but we want to reinforce that. And that is, we have a lot of earth changes coming. So they're telling us to put it out there. It's time to prepare for that.
The thing is to form your own communities with the people around you. Work together on decision making. Don't try to be an island in yourself, because that will not work. You have to form your own little communities of which decisions can be made by the whole.
I think too, when we talk about the destruction of societal systems and that feeling of loss of control and the fear over that, one way to channel your energy is to start brainstorming about what hasn't worked in the past and what kind of systems we can create for the future that would be moral and sound, beneficial to the majority of people, and would not foster the corruption and problems that we have seen in this past cycle.
So with that, again, thanks for being with us.
And peace be with you on your journey to enlightenment. Take care. Be safe.